The rope snapped and she fell into his arms like a collapsing mountain. 7 feet of Apache muscle, still warm, still breathing. Her eyes opened pure black, no white at all, and blood bubbled from her lips when she whispered, "Run." Gideon Hail had paid 12 cents for a cabin at auction. What he got was a dying giant, a noose still burning her neck, and 5 riders cresting the hill with torches. Tonight he'd learn what 12 cents of truth costs a man's soul. Hit subscribe right now. Stay till the end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this rides. Let's go. "12 hits." The auctioneer's gavel hovered. 40 men packed Liberty's town square, and not one of them moved. "Going once." Gideon Hail raised his hand. Heads turned. Someone laughed. Jacob Stern spat tobacco juice and muttered, "Damn fool." "Sold." The auctioneer slammed the gavel like he wanted it to break. "Gideon Hail, may God help you, son." Gideon walked forward, coins clinking in his palm. 12 cents, everything he had left. The auctioneer took the money without meeting his eyes. "Get there before dark," the man said. "That place, what about it? You'll know soon enough." Gideon turned. The crowd parted. Sarah Pritchett clutched her husband's arm. 2 ranchmen's grinned like they'd just watched a man buy his own coffin. Marcus Webb stepped into his path. Expensive hat, clean boots, gold watch chain. Half the territory between here and the Mexican border belonged to him, and his smile said he knew it. $20 Hail, right now, walk away clean. At $20, 2 months' wages. Gideon met Webb's eyes. "No." The smile died. "You'll regret this." "Maybe." Gideon pushed past him. "But it'll be my regret." He mounted his horse and rode east. "3 miles to the cabin. Gideon's horse picked its way through sage and red dirt while the sun hammered down. 12 cents, Gideon said aloud. The horse's ears flicked back. "That make me smart or stupid?" The horse didn't answer. "Previous owner died there." Gideon shifted in the saddle. "Unpleasant business," the man said. "What's that mean? Shot, stabbed, fell off his own roof." Wind stirred the juniper branches. "Don't matter, dead's dead, living's what counts." He patted the horse's neck. 4 walls and a roof, that's all a man needs to start over. The horse snorted. "You disagree." "Yeah, well, you ain't been sleeping in Jacob Stern's barn for 8 months, eating charity meals, watching your pride shrink every damn day." He crested the rise. The cabin sat below in a shallow bowl backed against red rock. Small, rough, 1 door, 1 window, roof sagging in the middle like a sway-backed mule. "Home," Gideon said. The horse stopped dead. "Come on now." Gideon kicked gently. "Ain't nothing." The horse backed up 3 steps, shaking its head. A low whine building in its throat. "What the hell's wrong with you?" Then he saw the gate, 2 posts, crossbeam, and hanging from it, Jesus Christ. A woman, hanged, rope tight around her neck body, suspended feet, dangling a foot off the ground. But not just any woman. She was massive, 7 feet tall, maybe more, copper skin streaked with dirt and dried blood, black hair falling in ropes past her shoulders, arms thick as fence posts, legs like tree trunks, a torn doeskin dress barely covering her, Apache. Gideon's hand went to his revolver. His mouth had gone dry as sand. "She's dead," he said. "Has to be. Been hanging there since—" The woman's chest moved. Just a flutter, small, but he saw it. No, that ain't possible." He dismounted, legs shaking. The horse tried to bolt, but he held the reins tight. Easy now." He walked toward the gate, 20 feet, 15, 10. Up close, it was worse. The rope had cut deep, leaving a purple-black line across her throat. Her wrists showed rope burns. They'd tied her before hanging her. Blood caked her hairline where something heavy had split the skin. They'd beaten her, bound her, strung her up to die slow, and somehow she was still breathing. Gideon pulled his knife. "I got you. Hold on." He reached up, started sawing at the rope, thick hemp already frayed. The blade bit through strand by strand. The woman's eyes snapped open. Gideon stumbled backward, nearly dropped the knife. Her eyes were completely black, no white showing, and they locked onto him with inhuman intensity. A sound came from her throat, wet, desperate. "Hold on." The rope parted. She fell like a collapsing building. Gideon tried to catch her, might as well have tried to catch a boulder. They went down together, him underneath his ribs, screaming as her full weight crushed the air from his lungs. Stars burst across his vision. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only feel her weight pressing him into the dirt like she meant to bury him. Then she rolled off. Gideon sucked in air, gasping, vision clearing. The woman lay on her back, massive hands clawing at the noose still tight around her neck. Her fingers were bleeding, nails broken, but she tore the rope loose and yanked it over her head. She collapsed, chest heaving, making sounds like a dying animal. "Easy." Gideon crawled toward her. "You're free. You're..." Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. The grip was iron, unbreakable. Her black eyes found his. "Danger." One word, barely a whisper. Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp. Gideon knelt there, heart slamming against his ribs. His wrist was white where she'd gripped it. He had to pry her fingers open one by one. What the hell did I just buy? Getting her inside took 15 minutes and damn near killed him. She was dead weight, massive, and every time he thought he had a grip, she'd shift and nearly slip away. By the time he dragged her through the cabin door, his back was screaming and sweat poured down his face. The interior was dark. Single-room, dirt floor, stone fireplace, a wooden sleeping platform in the corner, table and chair knocked over like someone had left fast or been taken. Gideon pulled her onto the platform, arranged his blanket under her head. In the dim light, her skin looked gray. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. He stood turned toward the door and froze. Carved deep into the wall beside the entrance, "They know." Below it, messier, more desperate, "Hide the proof." Proof of what? His voice sounded strange in the empty room. He moved closer, touched the carved letters. Fresh. The wood inside the cuts was still pale. Someone had carved this recently. Right before, whatever happened to them. Gideon turned, studying the cabin. It looked empty, abandoned. But if someone had hidden proof of something... He dropped to his knees and started checking the floor, stomping, testing, working in a grid pattern. Near the fireplace, his boot made a different sound, hollow. He brushed away dirt, found faint seams, a trapdoor, no handle, just boards fitted so carefully they were nearly invisible. He worked his knife into the gap, prying, levering. The trapdoor groaned and popped open, a hole 3 feet deep, and at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, an iron box. 12 inches long, 8 wide, heavy, with a padlock. Gideon lifted it out, set it on the floor. His hands were shaking. This was it. The proof. Whatever the previous owner had died protecting. From outside came a sound that made his blood freeze. Hoofbeats, multiple horses, coming fast. Gideon shoved the box back in the hole covered. The trapdoor kicked dirt over it. He moved to the window and peered through a crack in the leather flap. 5 riders cresting the rise, walking their horses now spread out in a line. The lead rider wore a silver-rimmed hat. Gideon's stomach dropped. He'd seen that hat in Liberty, on a tall man with blue ice for eyes. Someone had called him Fletcher Knox, a gunman, the kind you hired when you wanted someone gone permanent. The riders stopped at the gate where the woman had been hanging. Fletcher dismounted, studied the cut rope, looked toward the cabin. Even from 100 feet away, Gideon felt that stare. "Gideon Hail," Fletcher's voice cut through the still air. "We know you're in there, come on out." Gideon's hand rested on his revolver, 5 against 1. "Bad odds. We don't mean any harm, just want to talk." The woman on the platform stirred. A small sound escaped her throat. "You cut down something that don't belong to you," Fletcher called. "That Apache girl, she's a criminal. Murdered 3 white men. We had legal right to hang her. Legal. Gideon's jaw tightened. Out here, legal meant whatever the man with the most money said it meant. All we want is the girl, hand her over. We'll pay you $50, $50, Hail, more than you've seen in a year. $50, a fortune, a way out. Gideon looked at the woman. They'd beaten her, hanged her, left her to die in the sun. Hail. Fletcher's voice had an edge now. I'm counting to 10, then we're coming in. The woman's eyes opened, those impossible black eyes locked onto Gideon. 1, her lips moved. 2, that same word, barely a whisper. 3, danger. 4, Gideon pulled his revolver. 5, he checked the cylinder. 6 rounds, against 5 men. 6, the woman tried to sit up, failed, collapsed back onto the platform. 7, stay down, Gideon said quietly. 8. He moved to the door, pressed his back against the wall beside it. 9. Outside, leather creaked. Spurs jingled. Someone jacked around into a rifle. 10. Boots hit the ground. Multiple men dismounting. Gideon's finger curled around the trigger. The door exploded inward. Fletcher Knox stepped through, pistol drawn, and Gideon's world collapsed into smoke and thunder, and the smell of gunpowder burning his nose. But before he could fire, before Fletcher could turn, the woman on the platform moved. She was a blur, impossibly fast for someone who'd been half dead 30 seconds ago. Her hand shot out, grabbed the table's edge, and hurled it like it weighed nothing. 20 pounds of pine slammed into Fletcher's chest. He went down hard, pistol flying. What the... The other 4 men crowded the doorway. The woman was on her feet now, swaying, one hand pressed to her throat, but her eyes, God, her eyes were wild, feral, filled with something that made Gideon's spine turn to ice. "Shoot her!" someone screamed. 4 pistols came up. The woman grabbed the sleeping platform, a solid piece of wood that took 2 men to move, and flipped it onto its side like a shield. Gunfire erupted. Bullets punched through wood, throwing splinters. The woman roared, not a scream, a full-throated battle cry that shook the walls, and charged. She hit the doorway like a battering ram. 2 men went flying. 1 crashed into the fireplace stones and didn't move. The other tumbled out the door, screaming. Gideon stood frozen, revolver hanging useless in his hand. Fletcher scrambled to his feet, bleeding from his nose, eyes wide with something Gideon had never seen in a gunman before. Fear. Fall back. Fletcher grabbed his pistol, fired twice without aiming. Fall back now. The woman took a bullet in the shoulder. Didn't slow. She grabbed Fletcher by his silver-rimmed hat and the front of his shirt, and threw him through the open door. He sailed 10 feet and hit the ground, rolling. The remaining men were already running for their horses. The woman swayed in the doorway, blood running down her arm, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She watched the riders flee, scrambling onto their mounts, wheeling away in a thunder of hooves. Then she turned to look at Gideon, those black eyes, unreadable, ancient. She opened her mouth, blood bubbled between her lips. "They'll come back," she said in broken English. "More men, more guns." Then her legs gave out and she collapsed. Gideon caught her before she hit the ground, barely. Even wounded and exhausted, she was heavy as stone. "Easy now," he said. "Easy." He lowered her to the floor, pulled his blanket over her. She was shaking, her skin cold despite the heat. "Who are you?" Gideon asked. Her eyes were already closing. "Naelli. Why'd they hang you?" "Truth." Her hand moved weak, pointing toward the fireplace, toward where the trap door was hidden. "Truth. They fear." What truth? But she was unconscious again, her breathing, shallow blood pooling beneath her shoulder. Gideon stood, went to the door, looked out. The riders were gone. Dust hung in the air where they'd fled. His hands were shaking. He'd bought a cabin for 12 cents. What he'd gotten was a war, and something told him the first battle had just begun. Gideon tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it against the bullet wound in Naelli's shoulder. Blood soaked through immediately, warm and dark. Her skin had gone cold, clammy, and when he checked her pulse, it was fast and thready, like a dying bird's heartbeat. "Don't you die on me," he said. "Not after all that." She didn't respond. Her massive chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. He needed supplies. Bandages, whiskey to clean the wound, maybe a needle and thread if he could find any. The cabin had nothing. Just dust and shadows and secrets carved into the walls. His horse was gone, bolted during the gunfight, probably halfway back to Liberty by now, which meant he was on foot 3 miles from town with a wounded Apache warrior woman who'd just thrown 4 men around like rag dolls despite having a noose burn around her neck and a bullet in her shoulder. Gideon stood paced to the window, looked out. The sun was dropping fast, painting the red hills orange and purple. In another hour it would be full dark and Fletcher Knox would be back in Liberty, telling whoever paid him that the job wasn't finished. They'd come back. More men, more guns. Naelli had said so herself. "Truth they fear," Gideon muttered, moving to the fireplace. He kicked dirt away from the trapdoor, pried it open again, lifted out the iron box. The padlock was old but solid. He tried his knife on it, but the blade just skittered off the metal. He looked around for something heavier, found a loose stone from the fireplace, brought it down hard on the lock. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The lock held. He hit it again, again. On the 5th strike the hasp bent, and on the 6th it broke clean off. Gideon set down the stone, breathing hard, and opened the box. Papers. Dozens of them folded and pressed flat, some official-looking with seals and signatures, others hand-drawn maps with property lines marked in ink. He pulled one out, unfolded it, tilted it toward the fading light from the window. A land deed, dated 1871, signed by Governor Marcus Webb, the same Webb who'd offered him $20 not 2 hours ago. The deed transferred 6,000 acres of Apache territory to the Double K Ranch for services rendered to the territorial government. Services rendered. Gideon snorted. That could mean anything from building a road to murdering the previous occupants. He pulled out another document. This one was a letter addressed to Judge William Crane in Liberty. The handwriting was neat, practiced, the words chosen, "Careful, Judge Crane. The Apache situation has been resolved per our discussion. Chief Whitehawk's village was cleared at dawn on the 14th. No survivors. The land is now available for development as planned. Your fee of $2,000 in gold has been deposited with the First Territorial Bank. Destroy this correspondence. M.W." Gideon read it twice, his stomach turning sour. No survivors. He looked at Naelli, unconscious on the floor, blood still seeping through the makeshift bandage. "Your people," he said quietly. "They killed your people." He went through the rest of the box. More deeds, more letters. A ledger book listing payments to various officials, judges, sheriffs, land commissioners, amounts ranging from $500 to $5,000. Next to each name was a note, Apache Creek Development, or White Hawk Relocation, or simply silence maintained. This wasn't just corruption. This was systematic extermination disguised as legal land acquisition, and the previous owner of this cabin, whoever he was, had collected proof of all of it. That's why they'd killed him. That's why they'd hanged Naelli here as a warning. And that's why Fletcher Knox had come with 4 armed men to retrieve her body. Dead women don't talk. Dead witnesses don't testify. Gideon sat back on his heels, the papers scattered around him, and tried to think. His hands were shaking again. Not from fear this time, from rage. He'd spent 8 months in Liberty taking charity, eating scraps, watching men like Webb and Crane walk the streets like kings, while people like him, honest, broken, trying, scraped by on nothing. He'd thought it was just the way things were, the natural order. But it wasn't natural. It was designed, built, paid for in gold and blood. A sound from behind him, Naelli stirring her breath, catching. Gideon moved to her side. Her eyes were open, unfocused, staring at the ceiling. "Easy," he said. "You're safe." Her head turned slowly toward him. Recognition flickered in those black eyes. "The box," she whispered. Her voice was like gravel scraping against stone. You opened it. Yeah. Then you know. I know some, not all. Who are you? Really? She tried to sit up, gasped, fell back. Her hand pressed against the bullet wound. Granddaughter, Chief Whitehawk. The letter mentioned him, said his village was... Gideon stopped, said there were no survivors. Lies. She coughed, blood flecking her lips. Some escaped. Children. Old ones. They hide in the Red Canyon 3 days north. My grandfather, he leads them. You're his granddaughter and they hanged you here. Why not just shoot you? Why make it public? Her eyes closed. Message to my people. To anyone who helps us, they hung me at the gate of the Truth Keeper's cabin, the man who collected their sins. She opened her eyes again, looked at him with sudden intensity. They wanted my grandfather to see, to know what happens to those who fight them. Did he see? No, I was taken before we could reach him. She coughed again, harder this time. 3 days ago, hunting party, 5 white men. They hit me from behind, tied me, brought me here. The short one with the silver hat, Fletcher Knox. Yes. He told me I would hang until I was bones, until the crows picked me clean, until my grandfather came and saw what mercy looks like in the white man's justice. Gideon felt something cold settle in his chest. You hung there for 3 days. I do not die easy. She said it without pride, just fact. My grandmother was a spirit walker. My blood is strong. The rope hurt. The sun burned. But I did not die. Jesus Christ. Your God was not there. She tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. But you were. You cut me down. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. Men do not do right things. Not here, not now. Her eyes were starting to close again. You are strange, Gideon Hail. You know my name. I heard the silver hat man say it, before you. Her words trailed off. She was slipping back into unconsciousness. Wait. Gideon touched her arm. The papers. What do I do with them? Her eyes opened one more time, just slits. Live. Take them to Fort Bowie. Federal marshal there, not territory law. Federal, only one they cannot buy. Fort Bowie's 4 days' ride. Then ride fast. Her voice was barely audible now. They will come at dawn. Many men. You cannot fight them all. What about you? Leave me. Save the truth. Like hell I will. But she was already gone, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of deep unconsciousness, or something worse. Gideon stood paced to the door, looked out into the gathering dark. Stars were coming out hard and bright in the desert sky. Somewhere out there, Fletcher Knox was rallying more men, more guns, probably promising them gold or land or whatever currency their souls traded in. At dawn they'd come, maybe 10 men, maybe 20, and here he was with 6 bullets, no horse, a dying woman who weighed as much as a young bull, and a box of papers that proved powerful men were murderers. His options were limited. He could run, take the box, slip out in the dark, head north or west or anywhere that wasn't here, save the evidence, get it to Fort Bowie, expose the whole rotten system, but that meant leaving Naelli. She'd die. If the bullet wound didn't kill her, the men at dawn would. They'd burn this cabin to ash with her inside, destroy any trace that she'd existed, and go back to Liberty for drinks and congratulations. Or he could stay, try to defend her, fight them off with 6 bullets and pure stubborn will. He'd die. They'd both die. And the evidence would burn anyway. Damn it, Gideon said to the empty room. A third option crept into his mind. Dangerous, probably stupid, but it was an option. He could go to Whitehawk, 3 days north, Naelli had said. Her grandfather was hiding survivors in a red canyon. If Gideon could reach them, if he could convince Whitehawk to help, maybe, just maybe, they'd have a chance. But that meant moving Naelli, carrying her 3 days through hostile territory with no horse, no supplies, and a manhunt on his trail. Impossible. He looked at her lying on the floor, This giant woman who'd survived 3 days on a noose and still had the strength to throw men through doorways. She'd called her blood strong, said she didn't die easy. "You better not be lying about that," Gideon muttered. He made his decision. It took him 20 minutes to gather what little the cabin offered. A length of rope from the gate, the same rope that had nearly killed Naelli, now repurposed. A rusted canteen he found in the corner that still held a few swallows of water, the iron box with its damning papers, his revolver with 6 precious bullets. He tore down the leather window flap and used it to bind Naelli's shoulder wound, properly tying it tight enough to slow the bleeding, but not so tight it cut off circulation. She didn't wake during the process, which worried him more than he wanted to admit. Then came the hard part. Getting her onto his back was like trying to lift a dead horse. He squatted, got his arms under her, lifted with his legs, and nearly blacked out from the strain. She was solid muscle, 7 feet of warrior woman, built for breaking men and hunting elk. His back screamed, his knees shook, but he got her up, adjusted her weight across his shoulders, and staggered toward the door. The night air hit him like cold water, clear, sharp. The stars overhead were so bright they cast faint shadows. Gideon took one step, then another, finding his balance under Naelli's weight. North, 3 days, through territory where every white man would be looking for him, and every Apache might shoot him on sight for being white. "You better be worth this," he said to the unconscious woman on his shoulders. No answer, just the sound of her breathing and the crunch of his boots on hard earth. He started walking. The first hour was pure hell. His legs burned. His back felt like it might snap. Every few minutes he had to stop, lower Naelli to the ground, catch his breath, then lift her again and keep moving. The iron box hung from his belt, banging against his hip with every step, a constant reminder of what he was carrying and why men would kill him for it. The second hour was worse. His water ran out. His vision started to blur. He was following the North Star, trusting that Naelli's directions were accurate, but for all he knew, he was walking in circles while Fletcher Knox and his men slept peacefully in liberty. During his third rest stop, while Naelli lay in the dirt and he sat gasping beside her, she spoke. "Stupid man." Gideon's head snapped up. Her eyes were open, reflecting starlight. "You're awake." "Should have left me." Each word was an effort. "Told you to run." "Yeah, well, I'm not great at taking orders." "You will die for nothing." "Maybe, but at least I'll die doing something right for once." He took a breath. "Your grandfather, the Red Canyon, how do I find it? You cannot carry me. 3 days. Watch me. I am too heavy. You are too weak. Story of my life, lady. Now tell me how to find the canyon before I change my mind and leave you here out of spite." A sound came from her throat. It took him a second to realize she was laughing. A painful, rasping laugh, but still. "North," she said. "Follow the star. 2 days you will see the broken mesa shaped like a hand reaching. Turn east. Half day more. The canyon mouth is hidden behind fallen stones. Call out. Say Naelli sent you. Say the Truth Keeper's heir comes." Her eyes closed again. "If they do not shoot you, they will help. And if they do shoot me, then at least you die quick, better than what comes at dawn." She drifted off again, and Gideon sat there in the dark, looking at the stars, thinking about choices and consequences, and the strange path that had led him here. 12 cents. That's all it had cost. 12 cents, and everything had changed. He stood, bent, lifted Naelli onto his shoulders again, and walked north. By dawn, he'd made maybe 5 miles. His legs were lead. His back was on fire. He'd fallen twice, once hard enough to draw blood from his palms, but he kept moving because stopping meant dying, and he'd had enough of dying. The sun rose fast, turning the sky red, then gold, then harsh white. Heat came with it, immediate and oppressive. Gideon's throat was dust. His lips were cracked. He tried not to think about water. Around mid-morning he heard riders, distant at first, then closer, voices carrying on the still air. He was crossing open ground, nowhere to hide, and the riders were coming from the south, from Liberty. Gideon lowered Naelli behind a scattered pile of rocks, barely enough cover to hide a dog, let alone a 7-foot woman, and crouched beside her, revolver drawn. 6 bullets. He checked the cylinder like that might make more appear. The voices got clearer. 3 men, maybe 4, talking loud, confident. Tracks head north, clear as day. Stupid bastard really thinks he can carry her. Fletcher wants them both alive if possible, but dead works too. They were close now, close enough that Gideon could hear saddle leather creaking. He pressed himself against the rocks, tried to make his breathing quiet, and waited. The riders appeared over a low rise, maybe 50 yards away. 4 men on horseback, rifles across their saddles, scanning the horizon. One of them pointed in his direction. "There, see that rock pile?" Gideon's finger tightened on the trigger. Then, from behind him, a sound. Naelli was moving, sitting up. Her black eyes were open and focused, and she was looking past him at the riders with an expression that made his blood run cold. "No," he whispered, "you're too weak." She stood, just rose to her full height like she hadn't been shot, hanged, and carried 5 miles through the desert. The morning sun lit her from behind, turning her into a massive silhouette against the sky. The riders froze. "What the hell is that?" one of them said. Naelli opened her mouth and screamed. It wasn't human. It was something older, something that came from deep in the earth, a battle cry that shook the air and sent jackrabbits bolting from the sage. The horses panicked. 2 of them reared, throwing their riders. The other 2 bolted sideways, and 1 man went flying while the 4th fought to stay mounted. Naelli charged. She was wounded, exhausted, half dead, but she moved like thunder, covering ground in huge strides. And the 1 rider still on his horse raised his rifle. Gideon shot him. The revolver kicked in his hand. The rider jerked backward and slid from his saddle. 5 bullets left. The 2 thrown riders were scrambling for their guns. Naelli reached the first one, grabbed him by his collar and belt, and threw him. He sailed 15 feet and hit the ground hard enough that Gideon heard bones break. The second rider got his pistol up. Fired, missed. Gideon shot him twice. Center mass. The man folded. 3 bullets left. The 4th rider, the one who'd fallen when his horse bolted, was running, just running flat out back toward Liberty, screaming for help. Naelli took 3 steps and collapsed. Gideon ran to her, dropped to his knees beside her. Blood was seeping through the leather bandage, again fresh and bright. "Why'd you do that?" he demanded. You shouldn't have had to." Her breathing was ragged. "They saw us. 1 escapes, tells others where we are. More come." "You're bleeding again." "Always bleeding." She tried to smile, failed. "But they fear me now. Good. Fear is useful. Fear doesn't stop bullets." "No, but you did. Thank you. Gideon Hail." He sat back, hands shaking, and looked at the carnage around them. 3 men down, 1 fleeing. Horses scattered across the desert, already disappearing over the horizon. "We need to move," he said. "That last one will bring the whole territory down on us." "Cannot move. Too weak." "Then I'll carry you again." "You cannot. Watch me." He stood bent, got her onto his shoulders one more time, and started walking north while the sun climbed higher, and somewhere behind them a terrified man ran toward Liberty, with news that would turn this from a manhunt into a war. By noon, Gideon's vision was starting to tunnel. The sun beat down like a hammer, and his legs moved on instinct alone, 1 foot in front of the other, while Naelli's weight pressed him deeper into the earth with every step. He'd stopped counting hours, stopped thinking about distance. All that mattered was north, 1 more step, then another, until his body gave out, or something stopped him. Neither happened. What happened instead was water. He crested a rise and saw it below, a thin creek cutting through red rock, probably seasonal, maybe 3 feet across at its widest point. Trees grew along its banks, actual green trees, and the sight of them made something break loose in Gideon's chest. He stumbled down the slope, lost his footing, and they both went down hard. Naelli rolled off his shoulders and lay still while Gideon crawled the last 20 feet to the creek on his hands and knees. The water was cold, clear. He plunged his face in and drank until his stomach cramped, then drank more, then finally sat back, gasping and shaking. "Naelli," his voice came out as a croak. "Water, we got water." She didn't respond. Gideon crawled to her, turned her over. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. The leather bandage on her shoulder was soaked through with blood again, and when he touched her skin it was burning hot. Fever. The wound was infected, or she was just shutting down, or both. "No, not now. Not after—" He stopped, took a breath. "You don't get to die after I carried you 10 miles. You hear me? That's not how this works." He went back to the creek, soaked his torn shirt in the cold water, brought it back and pressed it against her forehead. Then he unwrapped the bandage on her shoulder and nearly vomited at what he saw. The bullet wound was angry red, swollen, leaking something that wasn't quite blood and wasn't quite pus. The edges looked black. Gideon had seen infections before during the war, and he knew what came next. Fever, delirium, death. Unless he could stop it. He looked at the creek, at the trees, at the complete absence of anything useful. No medicine, no whiskey, no clean bandages, just water and dirt and his own ignorance about how to save someone's life. "Think," he said aloud. "Come on, think. Heat." His grandmother had told him once that heat could burn out infection, or maybe she'd said cold. He couldn't remember, but fire he could do. He gathered dry wood from beneath the trees, arranged it in a pile, used flint from his pocket and the back of his knife to strike sparks until one caught. The fire grew slowly, reluctant, but he fed it carefully and soon had flames. He held his knife blade in the fire until the metal glowed red. "This is going to hurt," he said to Naelli's unconscious form. "Sorry." He pressed the flat of the blade against the wound. Naelli's eyes snapped open, and she screamed a sound that echoed off the canyon walls and sent birds exploding from the trees. Her massive hand shot out and grabbed Gideon's wrist, squeezing until he thought the bones might break. "I know," he shouted. "I know it hurts, but the infection I have too—" She squeezed harder. His wrist made a popping sound. Then her eyes focused on his face, and something like recognition flickered there. Her grip loosened slightly. "Burning," she gasped. "You are burning me." "Killing the infection. My grandmother, she said heat. I don't know if it works, but I don't know what else to do." Naelli stared at him for a long moment. Then she released his wrist and lay back, breathing hard. "Do it again." "What?" "The wound. It must be clean. Do it again." "It's going to. I know what it will do." Her jaw clenched. "Do it." Gideon heated the knife blade again and pressed it to the wound a second time. Naelli's whole body went rigid, her back arching off the ground, but she didn't scream this time, just a low sound between her teeth like grinding stone. He did it a third time, a fourth. By the fifth time, Naelli had passed out again, and Gideon's hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold the knife. He went to the creek, plunged the blade into the cold water to cool it, then drank again and splashed water on his face. His wrist was swelling where Naelli had grabbed it, already turning purple. Worth it. If it saved her life, worth it. He fashioned a new bandage from his already destroyed shirt, soaked it in creek water and wrapped it around her shoulder. Then he dragged her into the shade of the largest tree and sat with his back against the trunk, revolver in his lap, watching the southern horizon for dust clouds that would mean riders coming. Nothing yet, but they'd come. That man who'd run from the fight would reach Liberty by sundown, and Fletcher Knox would gather every gun he could buy or threaten or promise. By tomorrow morning, this creek would be surrounded, which meant they had to move tonight, in the dark. With Naelli still fevered and Gideon so exhausted he could barely keep his eyes open. He looked at the woman lying beside him. Even unconscious, even wounded, she was imposing. Her arms were thicker than some Shumper's thighs. Her hands could palm his head like a child's ball. He'd seen her throw grown men like they weighed nothing. "Who are you really?" he asked quietly. "What are you?" No answer except the creek's murmur and the hot wind through the trees. Gideon must have dozed, because the next thing he knew, the sun had moved significantly and Naelli was sitting up staring at him with those unreadable black eyes. "You sleep loud," she said, "snoring like a bear." Gideon jerked upright, grabbed his revolver. "I wasn't. How long was I?" "Not long." Sun moved 3 hands. She touched her shoulder, probed the bandage carefully. "The burning worked. Fever is less. You feel better." "I feel like I was shot and hanged and carried through the desert by a stubborn fool." She tried to smile. It almost worked. "But yes, better." "Can you walk?" "I can stand." She demonstrated, rising to her full height with only a slight waver. "Walking, we will see. We need to move tonight. That man who ran, I know, they will come with many guns." She looked north toward where the land rose into broken mesas and red rock canyons. "How far have we traveled?" "Maybe 15 miles from the cabin." I lost track. 15. She said it like she was doing math in her head. "We need 40 more to reach the canyon. At your pace, 3 days. We do not have 3 days. At my pace, lady, I just carried you. And I am grateful." She cut him off, but her tone was gentler. "But we must move faster. I can walk now. Slowly, but I can walk. Together we cover more ground." "What about your shoulder?" "It will hurt. Everything hurts. But hurt does not kill." She met his eyes. "You understand, I have survived worse. We keep moving or we die. There is no third choice." Gideon stood, tested his legs. They were rubber, but they held. "We rest till dark, then push through the night." "Agreed. And you need to tell me more about your grandfather, the canyon, what we're walking into, because if I'm risking my life for this, I want to know why." Naelli was quiet for a moment. Then she lowered herself back to the ground, moving carefully, and gestured for Gideon to sit. "My people were not always hunted," she began. "3 generations ago, we signed treaty with your government. Good faith, they called it. We gave them safe passage through our lands. They gave us protection, respect, trade." Her voice was bitter. "Lies. All lies. When they found gold in the northern hills, the treaty became paper to burn. They wanted your land. They wanted everything, our land, our water, our lives, if we refused to leave." She touched the rope burn on her neck. "Governor Webb came with soldiers, said we had 1 week to relocate to reservation lands east of here, dry lands, bad lands, where nothing grows and water is poison. Your grandfather refused. Of course he refused. Would you leave your home because a stranger with guns tells you to?" She didn't wait for an answer. Webb gave him 3 days to reconsider. On the 4th day, soldiers came at dawn. They burned the village, shot anyone who ran. My grandfather escaped with maybe 30 people. Children, mostly. A few elders, the rest. Her jaw tightened. "The letter you found. No survivors." That was meant to be true. Gideon thought about the papers in the iron box. The ledgers listing payments. The deeds signed with stolen land. And the man who owned the cabin, the one I bought, he was collecting evidence of all this, Thomas Bridger. He was Indian agent assigned by federal government to oversee treaty compliance. Naelli's expression softened slightly. "Good man, rare thing." When he discovered what Webb and the others were doing, he started keeping records. Every stolen deed, every bribe, every murder disguised as legal action. He kept it all. They killed him for it. They did worse than kill him. They made him disappear, burned his body, scattered his bones, told the federal government he had abandoned his post. Just another corrupt agent who took money and ran. She looked at Gideon, but he hid the evidence first. In that cabin, under the floor, hoping someone would find it, someone brave enough or stupid enough to use it. and your grandfather sent you to find it. I volunteered. I speak English better than the others. I am strong, can defend myself, or so I thought. She touched her shoulder again. They were waiting, knew I would come. They used the cabin as bait, and I walked into their trap like a foolish child. They underestimated you. You're still alive. Barely, and only because of you. She held his gaze. Why did you cut me down? The truth now, not because it was right. Men do not risk their lives for strangers because it is right. Gideon looked at the creek, at the water running over stones, and tried to find words for something he didn't fully understand himself. I was at that auction because I had nowhere else to go, he said finally. 8 months living on charity, watching men like Webb walk past me like I was dirt. I stopped mattering, stopped being someone. That cabin, 12 cents, it was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to build something even if it was just 4 walls. He paused. Then I saw you hanging there and I realized the cabin was never about a fresh start. It was about a choice. Walk away and stay small, or cut you down and become someone worth being again. So you chose to become someone. I chose to not be nobody. He met her eyes. Maybe that's the same thing. I don't know. But when they came demanding I hand you over for $50, when Fletcher Knox stood there counting to 10 like my life was something he could buy, he stopped, jaw tight. I got tired of being bought. Naelli studied him in silence. Then she reached out with her good hand and gripped his shoulder. Her hand was huge, warm, and the gesture felt significant in a way Gideon couldn't name. You are braver than you know, Gideon Hail. I'm terrified. All brave men are. She released his shoulder. But you carry the terror and move forward anyway. That is the definition of courage. They sat together as the sun dropped lower and the shadows grew long. Gideon cleaned his revolver, checked his remaining 3 bullets, tried not to think about how insufficient that number was. Naelli ate some kind of root she'd pulled from near the creek, offered him half, but he couldn't stomach it. When full dark came, they started walking again. Naelli moved slowly, one hand pressed against her wounded shoulder, but she moved. Gideon stayed close, the iron box heavy at his belt, his eyes scanning the darkness for movement. The stars came out bright and cold, and they followed them north. An hour passed. 2. Naelli's breathing grew labored, but she didn't stop. Gideon's legs were screaming, but he matched her pace. Around midnight they heard horses again. This time there were more of them, many more, distant but coming closer, spread out in a wide search pattern. Torches bobbed in the darkness like malevolent fireflies. Down, Naelli hissed. They dropped into a dry wash, pressing against the earth. The horses passed maybe 200 yards to the west, close enough that Gideon could hear men shouting to each other. Anything. Tracks disappeared at the creek. Keep looking. Fletcher wants them found before dawn. The voices faded. The torches moved on. Gideon waited another 5 minutes before moving. They're organized, searching in patterns. Webb has money and men, Naelli said. He will not stop until we are dead and the evidence is destroyed. Then we need to move faster. Agreed. They climbed out of the wash and continued north, moving quicker now, fear lending strength to exhausted legs. The land started to rise, becoming rockier, harder to cross. Twice Naelli stumbled and Gideon caught her, taking some of her weight until she could regain her footing. Near dawn, they reached the broken mesa. It loomed against the lightening sky exactly as Naelli had described rock formations jutting up like fingers of a massive hand reaching toward heaven. The sight of it sent relief flooding through Gideon's chest. Half a day east, Naelli said. Her voice was weak, exhausted. The canyon mouth. We are close now. Can you make it? I must. They turned east, following the base of the mesa as the sun began to rise. The heat came with it, immediate and oppressive. Gideon's water was gone, his lips were cracked and bleeding. Naelli was limping badly now, her face gray with pain and exhaustion. By mid-morning they were both staggering. The land shimmered with heat, and Gideon's vision kept blurring. Twice he thought he saw riders and reached for his revolver, only to realize it was just rocks or shadows or his mind playing tricks. Then Naelli stopped. "There," she said, pointing with her good arm. Gideon looked but saw nothing. "Just red rock and fallen boulders and more empty desert. I don't see behind the stones. The canyon mouth is hidden. Look closer." He squinted, forcing his eyes to focus, and then he saw a gap between two massive boulders, barely wide enough for a person to slip through. If Naelli hadn't pointed it out, he would have walked right past it. "That's it. That is it." She cupped her hands around her mouth and called out something in Apache. Gideon didn't understand the words, but he heard the emotion in them. Relief, desperation, hope, silence. She called again, louder this time. Still nothing. "They should answer," Naelli said, and for the first time Gideon heard real fear in her voice. "They should." A figure appeared between the boulders. Not a man. A boy, maybe 13 or 14, holding a rifle that looked too big for him. He stared at Naelli, then at Gideon, his face unreadable. Naelli spoke rapidly in Apache. The boy responded, his tone sharp, questioning. "He asks why I bring a white man," Naelli said to Gideon. "I am telling him you saved my life, that you carry the evidence that will expose our enemies." The boy's eyes flicked to the iron box at Gideon's belt. He called over his shoulder, and two more figures emerged from the canyon, an old woman and a younger man, both armed. More rapid Apache. Naelli was pleading now, arguing, her voice growing desperate. The old woman shook her head, pointed at Gideon, said something that made the young man raise his rifle. "What's happening?" Gideon asked. "They do not trust you. They have seen what white men do with promises and papers. They want the box, but they want you gone. I'm not leaving without. They will shoot you if you argue." Naelli turned to face him, and her eyes were filled with something like sorrow. "Give them the box, Gideon Hail. You have done enough. More than enough. Give them the evidence and walk away. Save yourself." "What about you?" "I am home. I am safe. But you, they will not harm you if you leave now. If you stay, if you insist on coming inside, they will kill you to protect the others. Do you understand? They will kill you." Gideon looked at the three armed Apaches, at Naelli, standing between him and them, at the gap in the rocks that led to safety or death, depending on what happened in the next 30 seconds. Behind them, somewhere in the distance, he heard hoofbeats. Many horses. Coming closer, Fletcher Knox and his manhunt had found their trail. "Make a choice," Naelli said quietly. "Right now, live or die." Gideon's hand rested on the iron box. 3 days of carrying it. 3 days of risking everything for evidence that might mean nothing, might change. Nothing might just be more paper in a world built on broken promises. He looked at Naelli's face, at the rope burn around her neck, at her shoulder where his knife had burned away infection, at her eyes that had seen her people murdered and her village burned, and 3 days hanging from a noose. The hoofbeats were closer now. Gideon made his choice. He pulled the iron box from his belt and held it out to the old woman. "This is yours," he said. "Use it well." The old woman took it, tested its weight, looked at him with something that might have been respect. "Go," Naelli said. "Run east. There are caves in the Red Hills. Hide until they pass. Then go to Fort Bowie. Tell the marshal what you saw. Tell him where we are. Bring help. They'll kill you before I can get back. Perhaps, but that is not your burden to carry." She reached out and touched his face with her massive hand. "You gave me life, Gideon Hail. You carried me when I could not walk. You burned fever from my wound. You are a good man in a world with too few good men. Now go. Live. Tell our story." The hoofbeats were very close now, less than a mile away. "Naelli, go." The young Apache fired his rifle into the air. The shot echoed off the canyon walls. Gideon ran. He ran east, away from the canyon mouth, away from Naelli and her people, away from the iron box and the evidence and everything he'd carried for 3 days. His legs were rubber, but fear gave them strength. Behind him he heard shouting, more gunfire, the thunder of horses arriving at the canyon. He didn't look back. He ran until his lungs were raw, until his vision went black at the edges, until his legs finally gave out and he collapsed behind a pile of boulders, gasping and shaking. The gunfire continued behind him, sharp cracks echoing across the desert. Then from the canyon a sound that made his blood run cold. War drums, deep, rhythmic, primal, the sound of a people who would not go quietly into extinction, the sound of a fight that had just begun. Gideon pressed his face against the boulder, trying to breathe quietly, while his heart hammered against his ribs. The war drums pounded behind him, primal and furious, mixing with gunfire and screaming and the thunder of horses. He wanted to look back, wanted to see if Naelli was still alive, but his body wouldn't move. Fear had him pinned like a bug on a board. A voice cut through the chaos, loud and sharp. "Burn them out, burn the whole damn canyon." Fletcher Knox. Even from a distance, Gideon recognized that cold, commanding tone. More gunfire, then a different sound, whooshing, crackling. Fire. "No," Gideon whispered. "No, no, no." The war drums didn't stop. If anything, they got louder, more defiant, and underneath them Gideon heard voices raised in songs he didn't understand, but felt in his bones. Songs of rage and grief and absolute refusal to surrender. He forced himself up, peered around the boulder. Smoke was rising from the canyon mouth, thick and black. Men on horseback circled the entrance like wolves around wounded prey. At least 20 riders, maybe more, all armed, some throwing torches into the gap between the boulders. And there, directing them from his horse with that silver-rimmed hat catching the morning sun, was Fletcher Knox. "You got two choices," Fletcher shouted toward the canyon. "Come out now or burn where you stand. Your decision." The war drums answered him, defiant, unbroken. Fletcher turned to the man beside him. "Marcus, you seeing this? These savages would rather die than surrender one box of papers." Gideon's stomach dropped. Marcus, as in Marcus Webb, the governor himself, had come to supervise the slaughter. "Then let them die," Webb said. His voice carried clear in the desert air, casual as discussing the weather. "We gave them a chance. What happens now is on them." "What about the evidence? Fire destroys paper same as it destroys flesh. We'll sift the ashes when it's done, make sure nothing survived." Webb shifted in his saddle. "Anyone asks, we'll say we were pursuing a dangerous fugitive who'd taken Apache hostages, had to use necessary force to protect innocent lives. And the white man, the one who helped her, find him, kill him. Say he died in the crossfire trying to rescue the hostages." Webb's tone hardened. "I want this finished by noon, Fletcher. No witnesses, no evidence, no story." Gideon's hands were shaking. He looked at his revolver, 3 bullets, against 20 armed men. Suicide, pure suicide. But the alternative was hiding here while Naelli and her people burned alive. He thought about her words. "You are braver than you know." He'd told her he was terrified, and she'd said all brave men were. That courage meant carrying the terror forward anyway. "All right then," Gideon said quietly. "Let's see how brave I really am." He stood up from behind the boulder and walked toward the canyon mouth, revolver hanging at his side. He'd made it maybe 30 feet before someone shouted, "Rider at 3 o'clock. No, wait, he's on foot." Heads turned. Guns came up. Gideon kept walking. Fletcher Knox wheeled his horse around, stared at him with those ice-chip eyes. "Well, well, the stubborn fool himself. Thought you'd be halfway to Mexico by now." "Disappointed." Gideon stopped about 50 yards out, close enough to talk, far enough that they'd have to aim to hit him. "Curious, more like. You had a chance to walk away clean. Why come back? Because you're burning innocent people over paper. Because Governor Webb there just ordered murder disguised as law. Because I'm tired of men like you deciding who matters and who doesn't." Webb rode forward, studied Gideon like he was examining a bug. "You're Gideon Hail, the man who bought Thomas Bridger's cabin for 12 cents. "That's me." "Bridger was a traitor. So was that Apache girl. So are you." Webb's voice was calm, reasonable. the tone of a man explaining simple facts. "This territory is being civilized, Mr. Hale. That process requires difficult decisions, unpleasant decisions, but necessary ones. The Apache have no concept of land ownership, no understanding of progress. They're obstacles to development, nothing more. They're people. They're savages who've murdered settlers, burned ranches, stolen livestock. My job, my duty as governor is to protect citizens and promote growth. If that means relocating hostile populations, so be it." "Relocating, that's what you call genocide now." Webb's expression hardened. "Careful with words like that. They get men killed. Men are already dying, women, children, and you're standing here justifying it with talk about progress and duty." Gideon raised his revolver, pointed it at Webb. "I got 3 bullets. You want to find out if one's got your name on it?" 20 guns came up, hammers clicking back. Fletcher Knox laughed. "You can't be serious. You think you can threaten the territorial governor and walk away?" "I don't plan on walking away." Gideon's arm was steady now, the fear burned away by something hotter. "But I plan on making this cost you something. Webb dies, all your careful plans fall apart. No governor means federal investigation. Federal investigation means those papers in that canyon actually get read by someone who can't be bought." "The papers will burn," Webb said. "Maybe, but I'm betting Chief Whitehawk's smarter than you think. I'm betting he's got copies hidden. I'm betting Thomas Bridger wasn't stupid enough to keep all his evidence in one place." Gideon had no idea if any of that was true, but he said it with conviction. "You kill these people, you make martyrs. You make a story, and stories are harder to kill than people." Webb's jaw tightened. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. "Shoot him," he said to Fletcher. Fletcher raised his pistol, and from the canyon mouth came a voice that stopped everyone cold. "No!" Chief Whitehawk stepped through the gap between the boulders. Gideon had expected an old man weathered and broken by loss. What he saw instead was a warrior in his prime, maybe 50 years old, 6.5 feet tall, broad-shouldered, and moving with the confidence of someone who'd never backed down from anything. He wore no feathers, no war paint, just simple buckskin and boots. But the way he carried himself, the absolute authority in his posture, made him more intimidating than any costume could have. Behind him came Naelli, limping but upright, her good hand gripping a rifle. Behind her came the others, 30 people, maybe more, emerging from the smoke. Old men and women, teenagers, children barely tall enough to hold weapons. All of them armed. All of them standing with Whitehawk in a ragged line facing the mounted riders. "You want to burn us, Governor Webb?" Whitehawk's English was perfect, unaccented. "Then do it. But know that we stand here by choice. We die here by choice. And our choice, our final act, will be witnessed by this white man who risked his life for my granddaughter, who carried her when she could not walk, who gave us the evidence that proves your crimes." "That evidence will burn," Webb said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Perhaps, but he will survive, and he will tell what happened here. And unlike us, white men listen when other white men speak." Whitehawk's eyes found Gideon's. "You have given us a gift, Gideon Hail, the gift of witness, of truth spoken to power. We do not ask you to die with us. We ask you to live, to remember, to testify." "I can't just—" Gideon's throat was tight. "I can't watch you all. You can. You must." Whitehawk raised his voice so all the riders could hear. "This man is under my protection. Any who harm him will answer to me. Do you understand, Governor Webb? You can kill us, but you cannot silence him without turning this into a massacre that even your money cannot hide." Webb's face had gone pale. He looked at Fletcher, at the 20 guns, at the line of Apache standing ready to die, at Gideon with his revolver still pointed at Webb's chest. "This is insane," Webb said. "Fletcher, kill them all, starting with no." Everyone turned. The voice had come from one of the riders, a young man with a deputy's star pinned to his vest. He was staring at the Apache line, at the children standing beside their grandparents at Naelli, with blood still seeping through her bandage. "I said no, Governor. I ain't shooting children." "You'll do what you're ordered." "I won't." The deputy dismounted, dropped his rifle in the dirt. "I signed up to protect people, not murder them. You want them dead, you pull the trigger yourself." Silence, heavy and profound. Then another rider dismounted. An older man, weathered face, hard eyes. "Deputy's right. This ain't law. This is butchery." "You're all cowards," Fletcher snarled. "Maybe." The older man walked toward Gideon, stopped beside him, turned to face Webb. "But I'll be a living coward with a clean conscience. Better than being a paid murderer." One by one, 5 more men dismounted. Some dropped their weapons. Some kept them but turned to face Webb and Fletcher instead of the Apache. "This is mutiny," Webb said, his voice shaking now. "You're all finished in this territory. I'll see you." "You'll see us testify," the deputy said. "Because Mr. Hail ain't the only witness anymore, Governor. We all saw you order the burning. We all heard you talk about destroying evidence and killing innocents. And some of us got families and friends who might be curious about where their tax money's been going." Webb's face had gone from pale to red. "Fletcher, I know." Fletcher's hand was tight on his pistol, but he wasn't pointing it at anyone. His eyes moved from face to face, calculating odds, counting loyalties. "We're outnumbered. Then make this go away. Pay them off, threaten them. I don't care how. Can't pay off a man standing in front of 30 Apache about to die for principle." Fletcher looked at Whitehawk, at Naelli, at Gideon. "And I ain't stupid enough to start a fight we can't finish. So what do you suggest?" Fletcher holstered his pistol. "I suggest we ride back to Liberty and figure out how to control this story before it controls us. Because right now we're standing in front of too many witnesses having a conversation that sounds real bad in a courtroom." Webb stared at him, breathing hard. Then he looked at Whitehawk. "This isn't over." "It is for today," Whitehawk said calmly. "You think you've won? You think those papers matter? I have judges, sheriffs, the entire territorial government in my pocket. Who's going to believe a few forged documents and the word of savages?" "The federal marshal at Fort Bowie," Gideon said. "That's who." "Fort Bowie is 4 days from here." "Then I better start riding." Gideon finally lowered his revolver. His arm was shaking from holding it up so long. "And I won't be alone. These men coming with me, Governor. All of us telling the same story. All of us ready to swear under oath what we saw today." The deputy nodded. "Damn right." Webb looked around at the faces, some defiant, some uncertain, but all of them closed to him now. His empire of money and threats and carefully maintained corruption was cracking, and everyone could see it. "Fletcher," he said quietly, "we're leaving." "Smart choice," Fletcher said. They mounted their horses, collected the riders who'd remained loyal, and rode south without another word. The dust of their leaving hung in the air long after they'd disappeared. Gideon stood there, revolver still in his hand, not quite believing he was alive. Whitehawk approached him. Up close, the chief was even more imposing, but his expression was kind. "You are a brave man, Gideon Hail." "I'm a terrified man who's too stubborn to run." "That is the best kind of brave." Whitehawk extended his hand. "You have my gratitude. My people's gratitude. You saved my granddaughter's life and gave us a chance to fight back. That is a debt we cannot repay." Gideon shook his hand. The chief's grip was firm, warm. "Just get those papers to someone who'll do something with them." "We will, but you should carry them, you and these men who stood with you." Whitehawk glanced at the deputy and the others. "The federal marshal will listen to you more than to us." "He's right," the deputy said. "We go together, tell the same story, bring the evidence. That's our best shot." Naelli limped forward. Her face was pale, her shoulder obviously causing her pain, but she was smiling. "You came back," she said to Gideon. "Couldn't let you have all the fun." "You are a fool." "Yeah, I've been told that before." He looked at her, at the rope burns still visible on her neck, at her shoulder. where his knife had burned away infection. You going to be okay? I will heal. My people will survive because of you. She reached out with her good hand and gripped his shoulder. You gave us something more valuable than life, Gideon Hail. You gave us hope. Hope doesn't stop bullets. No, but it stops surrender, and that is everything. White Hawk retrieved the iron box from inside the canyon and placed it in Gideon's hands. Take this. Show the marshal. Make him understand that what happened to us was not war or relocation. It was theft, murder, and it was signed by men who claimed to represent justice. Gideon took the box, felt its weight. 3 days of carrying it had nearly killed him. Now he'd carry it 4 more days to Fort Bowie. What will you do? He asked White Hawk. We will move deeper into the canyons, hide until we know the marshal's decision. If he comes with soldiers to protect us, we will trust him. If he comes with soldiers to remove us, White Hawk's jaw tightened. We will make them work for it. It won't come to that. You have faith in your government. No, but I have faith in witnesses and evidence and men who get tired of being tools for people like Webb. Gideon looked at the deputy and the others who'd defected. Sometimes the system breaks, but people can fix it, if they're willing to try. The deputy stepped forward. Name's Tom Reeves. You're going to need horses, water, food for the ride to Fort Bowie. We'll get that sorted. And we'll need to stop in Liberty first, gather more men who might be willing to speak up once they know others are doing the same. That's dangerous. Webb's got people everywhere, which is why we go in loud and public, make a scene, force people to choose sides. Tom grinned, and it made him look younger. You just threatened the territorial governor with 3 bullets and lived. I think we can handle a trip into Liberty. One of the other defectors, a grizzled man with a scar across his jaw, spoke up. We take the evidence to Judge Harlan first. He's old, maybe crooked, but he's got pride. Hates being played for a fool. We show him what Webb's been doing behind his back, he might just flip. And if he doesn't, Gideon asked, then we ride straight through and head for Fort Bowie without stopping. But we try diplomacy first. More witnesses mean more pressure. More pressure means Webb can't just make this disappear. White Hawk nodded approvingly. You are wise men, all of you. He looked at the sky, at the sun climbing higher. But you should leave soon. Webb will be planning his response. The longer you wait, the more dangerous this becomes. He's right, Naelli said. Go now. Ride fast. And when you reach the marshal, tell him that the Apache do not want war. We want justice. We want our land returned, our dead honored, and the men who ordered their murder punished. Tell him if he can guarantee those things, we will live in peace. But if he cannot, her voice hardened. Tell him we will fight until every one of us is bones in the sand. I'll tell him, Gideon promised. She leaned in close, her voice dropping so only he could hear. Thank you for carrying me, for burning the fever from my wound, for standing when you should have run. You are the kind of man the world needs more of. I'm just a guy who bought a cabin for 12 cents. No, you are the man who cut down justice itself and refused to let it die. She straightened, stepped back. Go now, Gideon Hail. Ride fast. Save us all. Tom Reeves and the other defectors gathered horses from those Fletcher had left behind. They found water and dried meat blankets and ammunition. Within an hour, they were ready to ride. 7 men total, including Gideon. 7 witnesses carrying 1 iron box full of evidence that could bring down a governor. Gideon mounted his horse, a sturdy roan that seemed calmer than his previous mount, and settled the iron box in his saddlebag. He looked back at the canyon mouth where White Hawk and his people stood watching. Naelli raised her good hand in farewell. Gideon raised his in return. Then Tom Reeves kicked his horse into motion, and the 7 riders headed south toward Liberty, toward confrontation, toward whatever came next. You think this'll work? Gideon asked Tom as they rode. Honestly, I don't know. Webb's got power money connections. But he's also scared now. You saw his face. He knows this could end him if it gets out. So he'll fight dirty. Of course he'll fight dirty. Men like that always do. Tom glanced at him. But here's the thing about fighting dirty. It only works when people are too scared to fight back. You cut down that girl, carried her for days, stood up to Fletcher Knox and the governor himself. You ain't scared anymore. And people follow brave more than they follow power. I'm terrified. Yeah, but you're doing it anyway. That's what counts. Tom grinned. Besides, we got 7 men and the truth. Webb's got money and lies. I'll take our odds. They rode in silence for a while, the desert stretching out around them in all directions. Behind them, smoke from the attempted burning still rose into the blue sky. Ahead, liberty waited with its secrets and its sins. Gideon touched the iron box in his saddlebag, felt its weight. 12 cents. That's what had started this. 12 cents and a decision to be someone instead of nobody. Now 7 men were riding toward a reckoning that might get them all killed. But at least they were riding together. At least they were trying. And sometimes Gideon thought that was enough. Liberty came into view just after noon, shimmering in the heat like a mirage that might disappear if you looked at it wrong. The 7 riders slowed their horses to a walk as they approached the main street, and Gideon felt every eye in town turn toward them. "Stay close," Tom Reeves said quietly, "and keep your hand visible. We're here to talk, not shoot." "Unless we have to shoot," the scarred man, his name was Daniel Cross, added. "Unless we have to shoot," Tom agreed. They rode down the center of the street in a tight formation, Gideon in the middle with the iron box visible in his saddlebag. People stopped what they were doing to stare. Sarah Pritchett clutched her husband's arm and whispered something urgent. Jacob Stern came out of his general store, tobacco juice staining his beard, eyes narrowed. "That's Gideon Hail," someone said. "Thought he was dead," someone else replied. "Thought he ran off with that Apache girl. He's got deputies with him. What's that mean?" Tom guided them to the courthouse, a 2-story building that served as both government office and occasional courtroom. Judge William Harlan's name was painted on a sign above the door. They dismounted. Tom handed his reins to one of the younger defectors. "Keep the horses ready. If this goes bad, we ride hard and don't stop till Fort Bowie." "Understood." Tom, Gideon, and Daniel climbed the courthouse steps. The door was unlocked. Inside, a clerk sat at a desk piled with papers, and he looked up with the expression of a man whose boring day was about to get complicated. "We need to see Judge Harlan," Tom said. "He's busy." "Make him unbusy. This is official business." The clerk studied Tom's deputy star, then looked at Gideon and Daniel. "What kind of business?" "The kind that involves the territorial governor ordering murder. Now go get the judge before I get impolite." The clerk's face went pale. He stood, knocked on an inner door, disappeared inside. Voices rose in argument, then the door opened, and Judge William Harlan stepped out. He was older than Gideon expected, maybe 70, with white hair and eyes that had seen too much. He wore a rumpled suit and an expression of permanent irritation. "Deputy Reeves, I heard you deserted your post." "I deserted a massacre, Your Honor. There's a difference." "Is there?" Harlan's gaze moved to Gideon. "And you're the fool who bought Thomas Bridger's cabin for 12 cents. Everyone in Liberty had bets on how long you'd survive. Most said 3 days. Some said you'd make it a week. Nobody thought you'd make it back." "Disappointed?" Gideon asked. "Curious. Marcus Webb came through here an hour ago with Fletcher Knox. Said you'd kidnapped an Apache prisoner and fled into the desert. Said you were armed and dangerous. Said if we saw you, we should shoot on sight." "And are you planning to shoot me, Your Honor?" Harlan looked him up and down. "Depends on what you've got to say. My office, now, just you 3. The others wait outside." They filed into Harlan's office, a cramped room that smelled like old paper and tobacco smoke. The judge sat behind his desk and gestured at 3 chairs. They sat. "Talk," Harlan said, "and this better be good." Tom started laying out the timeline, the auction, the hanging, Gideon cutting Naelli down, Fletcher Knox attack on the cabin, the chase through the desert, the standoff at the canyon. Harlan listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When Tom finished, Harlan looked at Gideon. Your turn. What did you see that made 7 men abandon their posts and risk treason charges? Gideon pulled the iron box from his coat and set it on Harlan's desk. This. What is it? Evidence. Land deeds, payment ledgers, letters. All proving that Governor Webb and others conspired to steal Apache territory through fraud and murder. Harlan stared at the box like it was a coiled rattlesnake. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. Who collected this evidence? Thomas Bridger, the Indian agent, the man Webb had killed and disappeared. Webb says Bridger ran off with government money. Webb's lying. Bridger was murdered because he discovered the truth. Gideon pushed the box forward. Open it, read the documents, then tell me I'm wrong. Harlan didn't move. His hands stayed flat on the desk, and something complicated crossed his face. Fear, maybe, or the realization that opening that box would change everything. If I look at this, Harlan said slowly, and it says what you claim it says, I'm obligated to act. You understand that I can't unsee it, can't pretend I don't know. That's the point, Tom said. And if I act, Webb will come after me, after all of us. He's got money influence men. He'll destroy me. He'll try, Daniel said. But you'll have witnesses, 7 of us, and the Apache themselves. And every document in that box, that's enough to force a federal investigation, even if Webb owns every judge in the territory. Especially if one judge stands up first, Gideon added. You do the right thing, Your Honor, others will follow. But someone has to go first. Someone has to be brave enough to say, this ends now. Harlan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had shifted. He looked older, tired, but also resolved. Thomas Bridger was a friend of mine, he said quietly. Good man, honest. When he disappeared, I suspected foul play, but I didn't investigate. Didn't ask questions. I told myself it wasn't my jurisdiction, wasn't my problem. He looked at Gideon. I've been a coward for 2 years, boy, watching Webb operate, knowing something was wrong, doing nothing, because it was easier than fighting. You telling me I get a chance to fix that? I'm telling you the choice is yours. Same as it was mine when I found Naelli hanging at that gate. Harlan reached out and opened the iron box. For the next hour, he read in silence while Tom, Gideon, and Daniel waited. The judge's expression grew darker with each document. Twice he got up and paced. Once he swore so loud the clerk knocked on the door to check if everything was okay. Finally, Harlan closed the box and sat back in his chair. This is worse than I thought, he said. Webb didn't just steal land. He orchestrated the extermination of an entire village, paid officials to cover it up, and used government resources to hunt down survivors. He rubbed his face. And I signed off on some of these property transfers right here, my signature. I didn't know what I was signing, but that's no excuse. You didn't know, Tom said. Ignorance isn't innocence, deputy. I should have asked questions, should have investigated. Instead, I rubber-stamped everything Webb put in front of me because it was easier than making waves. He stood. But that ends today. I'm issuing warrants. Webb knocks every official named in these documents. Federal charges, murder, conspiracy, fraud, theft of government property. Webb will run, Daniel said. Then we chase him, and if he doesn't run, we arrest him. Harlan opened his door and shouted for his clerk. Get me Sheriff Morrison, now. Tell him it's urgent. The clerk ran. Harlan turned back to Gideon. You started this with 12 cents and more guts than sense. Now let's see if we can finish it. Sheriff Morrison arrived 20 minutes later, a heavy-set man with a star on his vest and suspicion in his eyes. Harlan showed him the documents, explained the situation. Morrison's face went through several emotions: disbelief, anger, fear, before settling on grim determination. You're sure about this, Judge? You're sure you want to go after the governor? I'm sure I don't want to be remembered as the man who let him get away with it. Morrison nodded slowly. Then we're going to need more men. Webb's got at least 15 guns at his ranch, maybe more. We've got 7, Tom said, gesturing to the men outside. That's not enough. It'll have to be. Tom stood. Every minute we wait, Webb's getting ready to run or fight. We move now, we might catch him off guard. Or we might ride into an ambush and get slaughtered. That's a risk I'm willing to take. Morrison studied Tom's face, then looked at Gideon. You're the one who cut down White Hawk's granddaughter, the one who carried her for days. That's me. Why, what's an Apache girl to you? Gideon thought about the question, about Naelli hanging from that gate, about the rope burn on her neck, about the way she'd stood beside him at the canyon even when she could barely walk. She's someone who deserved to live, he said simply. Same as anyone else. Same as the people Webb murdered. I couldn't save them, but I could save her. And once I saved her, I couldn't let the men who tried to kill her walk away unpunished. Morrison was quiet for a moment. Then he unhooked his gun belt, set it on Harlan's desk, and strapped it back on tighter. All right then, let's go arrest a governor. They gathered in the street Tom's 7 Morrison and 2 of his deputies, Judge Harlan himself, insisting he come along to serve the warrants personally. 13 men total, armed and grim-faced. A crowd had formed. Half of Liberty was watching now, drawn by rumor and curiosity. Sarah Pritchett pushed through the crowd, her husband trying to hold her back. Judge Harlan, what's happening? People are saying you're going after Governor Webb. That's right, Mrs. Pritchett. But why? What's he done? Harlan held up one of the documents from the iron box. He's murdered innocent people, stolen their land, and used your tax money to pay for it. That's what he's done. The crowd murmured. Someone shouted, "Prove it!" I intend to, at trial, after he's in custody. Harlan raised his voice so everyone could hear. Anyone who wants to know the truth, come to the courthouse tomorrow. I'll read every document in this box. I'll show you exactly what's been happening while you've been paying taxes and trusting your government. And if we don't believe you, it was Jacob's stern, arms crossed face, skeptical, then don't. But at least you'll have heard the evidence. At least you'll have made your choice based on facts instead of fear. Harlan mounted his horse. Now clear the way. We've got work to do. The ride to Webb's ranch took 40 minutes. It sat in a valley surrounded by hills, a sprawling main house with several outbuildings, corrals, stables. Expensive, built on blood money. As they approached, men appeared on the porch. Armed men. Gideon counted at least 10, maybe 12. Fletcher Knox stood in the center, silver-rimmed hat catching the sun, and beside him, calm as Sunday morning, was Marcus Webb. That's close enough, Judge, Webb called out. You're trespassing on private property. Harlan reined his horse to a stop 50 feet from the porch. The 13 riders spread out in a loose line. Marcus Webb, I have warrants for your arrest. Federal charges, murder, conspiracy, fraud. You're coming with us. Webb smiled. On whose authority? Mine and the federal government's. I am the federal government in this territory, Judge. Or did you forget? Not anymore. Your authority ends when you commit crimes. Now step down from that porch and surrender peacefully. Or what, you'll shoot me 13 men against 15. Those are bad odds, Judge. Maybe. But we've got the law on our side. And we've got witnesses. And we've got evidence. Harlan pulled out the iron box and held it up. Thomas Bridger's evidence. Everything you did. Everyone you paid. All of it documented, signed, sealed. For the first time, Webb's composure cracked. His eyes fixed on that box, and something like fear flickered across his face. That's stolen property. It's evidence of your crimes. There's a difference. Fletcher, Webb said quietly, kill them all, starting with the judge. Fletcher's hand moved toward his gun, and Gideon shot him, not to kill. Center mass would have ended it, but Gideon didn't want to kill anyone if he could help it. He aimed low at Fletcher's leg, and the gunman went down with a scream, silver-rimmed hat flying off. Chaos erupted. Webb's men drew their weapons. Harlan's riders returned fire. Gun smoke filled the air, and horses screamed, and men dove for cover. Gideon's horse reared, and he nearly fell, grabbed the saddle horn with one hand while firing his last 2 bullets toward the porch. He didn't hit anyone, but it forced Webb's men back. Bought a few seconds. Tom Reeves was shouting orders, directing fire, trying to keep the line from breaking. Daniel Cross took a bullet in the shoulder and kept shooting. Morrison charged the porch, firing both pistols, and 2 of Webb's men went down. Then, from behind them, from the direction of Liberty, came more riders, dozens of them. Townspeople, ranch hands, shopkeepers, all armed, all riding hard toward the ranch. And at their head was Sarah Pritchett's husband, rifle in hand, face set with determination. "We're with the judge," he shouted. "Stand down or face the whole damn town." Webb's men saw the reinforcements and lost their nerve. Guns dropped, hands went up. The fight drained out of them in seconds. Fletcher Knox lay on the porch, clutching his leg, cursing and bleeding. Marcus Webb stood frozen, watching his empire collapse in real time. Judge Harlan dismounted and walked up the porch steps, warrant in hand. "Marcus Webb, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent, though I expect you'll want to talk once you realize how many people are testifying against you." Webb's face had gone gray. "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is. You just don't know it yet." Harlan gestured to Morrison. "Put him in irons, and get Knox to a doctor before he bleeds out. I want them both alive for trial." The arrests took another hour. Webb, Knox, and 8 of their men were secured and loaded into wagons. The townspeople who'd ridden to help stood around looking half stunned that they'd actually done something, that they'd actually stood up to the most powerful man in the territory. Sarah Pritchett approached Gideon, her eyes bright. "My husband told me what you did, how you saved that Apache girl, how you stood up when everyone else was too scared. I was scared too. But you did it anyway, that's the difference." She squeezed his arm. "Thank you for reminding us what courage looks like." Tom Reeves found Gideon sitting on the porch steps, exhausted, his revolver empty on his lap. "You started a revolution with 12 cents. You know that." "I just bought a cabin." "You bought more than that. You bought a chance to be someone, and you took it." Tom sat beside him. "We'll still need to ride to Fort Bowie, get federal marshals involved, make sure this sticks. But the hard part's done. Webb's finished. His whole corrupt network is collapsing. And it's because one man decided cutting down a dying woman was more important than $50. "Naelli," Gideon said. "Her name's Naelli." "Well, Naelli's people are safe now, and that's on you." Gideon looked at the ranch, at the expensive house built on stolen land and murdered dreams. "What happens to this place? If the courts are fair, gets returned to the Apache, along with all the other land Webb stole." Tom stood, offered his hand. "Come on, we've got a governor to escort to jail and a story to tell the marshal. And somewhere out there, a 7-foot warrior woman is waiting to hear that justice finally came through." Gideon took his hand, let Tom pull him up. His body was exhausted, his wrist still bruised where Naelli had grabbed it, his back screaming from carrying her for days. But he was alive. And more than that, he mattered. He'd made a difference. 12 cents. That's all it had cost to buy back his soul. The ride to Fort Bowie took 4 days, just as Naelli had said. They brought Webb and Fletcher in chains along with the iron box and a dozen witnesses. The federal marshal listened to their story, examined the evidence, and issued orders that afternoon. Federal troops would escort Whitehawk and his people to protected lands. A full investigation would be launched into corruption throughout the territorial government, and Marcus Webb would stand trial for murder. 6 months later, after the trial ended with guilty verdicts and Webb sentenced to hang, Gideon rode north to find Naelli. He found her in the Red Canyon, her people rebuilding their lives on land that had been legally returned to them. The rope burn on her neck had faded to a thin scar. Her shoulder had healed. She stood tall and strong and alive. "You came back," she said. "Couldn't leave without saying goodbye." "Goodbye. You are leaving. Got a cabin that needs rebuilding. Thought maybe I'd make it into something worth living in." He paused. but I'll visit, if that's all right." She smiled, and it transformed her face. "It is more than all right, Gideon Hail. You will always be welcome here, you and any who stood with you. Your grandfather doing okay?" "He is well. He asked me to give you this." She pulled something from her belt, a knife, beautifully crafted, the handle carved with symbols Gideon didn't understand. "He says it is a weapon for a warrior, and you have proven yourself a warrior, even if you are a strange, stubborn white man who snores like a bear." Gideon took the knife, felt its balance. "Tell him thank you, and tell him if he ever needs help again, he knows where to find me." "I will tell him." She gripped his shoulder with that massive hand. "You cut me down when you should have run. You carried me when I could not walk. You burned fever from my wound, and stood beside my people when others would have looked away. That is not something we forget, Gideon Hail. That is not something we can ever repay. You don't need to repay it. You just need to live. Build your homes, raise your children, remember your dead. That's enough." "It is everything," she agreed. "And we will do it in your name, the man who paid 12 cents for justice and refused to let it die." Gideon rode back to Liberty as the sun set, painting the red hills gold and orange. The cabin waited for him, damaged but standing ready to be rebuilt into something better. And for the first time in years, Gideon Hail felt like he was riding toward a future instead of away from a past. Sometimes 12 cents is all it takes to buy back a man's soul and give forgotten people their voice again. Sometimes courage is just exhaustion that refuses to surrender. Sometimes one person standing up is enough to make others remember they can stand too. And sometimes the smallest purchase, the cheapest, most desperate gamble becomes the most valuable thing you'll ever own. Not because of what it cost, but because of what it made you become. Gideon learned all of this in the span of 1 week, and he carried those lessons for the rest of his life. And every time someone asked him about the scar on his wrist or the Apache knife on his belt, he'd tell them about a giant woman hanging from a gate, about war drums in a canyon, about the price of being someone instead of nobody. He'd tell them that freedom isn't free and justice isn't guaranteed, but both are worth fighting for, even when, especially when the cost seems too high. Because in the end, what you're willing to stand up for defines who you are, and Gideon Hail had finally figured out exactly who he wanted to be.